There are moments in life when you reach the end of your own strength. You've tried every solution you know. You've knocked on every door. You've prayed, you've planned, you've pushed forward with everything you have. And yet the situation in front of you still looks impossible. The path is blocked. The door is closed. The future seems uncertain. But it is exactly in moments like these that faith becomes real. Because when human ability reaches its limit, that is often where God begins to move. What looks like a dead end to us is often just the beginning of a miracle that God is preparing behind the scenes. Too many people believe that God only works when the path is clear. They think that if the circumstances look good, then God must be involved. But the truth is, God often shows his greatest power when the path is not clear at all. When the road disappears, when the answer seems impossible, when everyone else says there's no way, God specializes in situations where there's no human solution. You may be facing a financial problem that seems bigger than your income. You may be dealing with a family issue that seems beyond repair. You may be carrying a burden in your heart that no one else even understands. And every time you think about it, your mind keeps telling you the same thing. There is no way out. But God is not limited by what you can see. God is not restricted by what others believe. And God is never trapped by circumstances that trap people. When God decides to move, doors that were locked suddenly open. Paths that didn't exist suddenly appear. Opportunities that seemed impossible suddenly become reality. The problem is that many people give up right before the breakthrough. They walk away because the path hasn't appeared yet. They lose faith because the solution hasn't arrived on their schedule. They stop believing because the situation still looks the same. But God's timing is not the same as human timing. Sometimes God allows the situation to become impossible so that when the answer finally comes, everyone knows it wasn't human effort, it was divine intervention. It was divine. Think about that for a moment. If the door opened easily, you might believe it was your ability. If the solution came quickly, you might credit your own wisdom. But when there is absolutely no way forward and suddenly a way appears, there is only one explanation. God made the way. That's why faith is not about what you see. Faith is about trusting the one who sees what you cannot. Faith says, even if I don't see the path yet, I believe God is already preparing it. Faith says, even if the door hasn't opened yet, I believe God is already working on the other side. Faith says, even when everything around me says impossible, I know God is still able. And here is something powerful to remember. God doesn't just open existing paths. Sometimes he creates brand new ones. He creates opportunities that were never there before. He connects people who were never supposed to meet. He shifts circumstances in ways that no human plan could ever arrange. In other words, God doesn't just help you find a way. Sometimes he builds the way while you are still trusting him. But trusting God in impossible situations requires courage. It requires patience. And most importantly, it requires the decision not to quit. Because when the pressure rises, that's when faith is tested. When the obstacles grow larger, that's when belief becomes harder. That's when belief becomes harder. At the very moment when giving up feels easiest is often the moment when the miracle is closest. God is not intimidated by your impossible situation. He is not worried about the obstacles in front of you. He is not confused by the problems surrounding you. The same God who created the universe is more than capable of creating a path through the difficulty you are facing today. So instead of focusing on how impossible the situation looks, focus on how powerful God is. Instead of asking how will this work out, begin to declare God will make a way. Because when God decides to move, the impossible becomes possible. When God steps into a situation, barriers break, doors open, and paths appear. And one day you will look back at the very situation that once terrified you, and you will realize something amazing. The place where you thought your story would end was actually the place where God began to write a miracle. There are moments in life when human strength reaches its limit. People try everything they know how to do, They use their knowledge, their resources, their connections, and their experience to solve the problem in front of them. At first, it may feel like progress is being made. Plans are formed, strategies are created, and efforts are put into motion. But sometimes, despite all the effort and determination, the situation does not change. The obstacle remains, the door stays closed, and the path forward seems completely blocked. This is the point where many people begin to feel discouraged. They start to believe that if their own ability cannot fix the situation, then nothing will. Human thinking naturally assumes that the solution must come from human strength. Society teaches people to rely on their skills, their intelligence, and their hard work. While those things are valuable and important, they are not always enough to solve every challenge life brings. There are situations in life that are simply bigger than human power. Some problems go beyond what education can solve. Some struggles cannot be fixed by money. Some battles cannot be won by influence or reputation. A person can be intelligent, hardworking, and well-prepared, yet still face circumstances that leave them feeling powerless. It is in these moments that something important begins to happen. When human ability reaches its limit, people are often placed in a position where they must look beyond themselves, instead of relying only on what they can control. They begin to realize that there is a greater power at work. God's power does not operate under the same limitations that people experience. Human strength is limited by time, energy, knowledge, and opportunity. God's strength is not bound by any of those things. Where people see obstacles, God sees possibilities. Where people see a closed path, God sees a new direction waiting to be created. Many of the greatest breakthroughs in life happen when people reach the end of their own ability and begin to trust that God can do what they cannot. This does not mean that effort is unimportant. Hard work, planning, and responsibilities still matter, but there comes a point when effort alone cannot produce the answer. At that point, faith becomes essential. Faith is the ability to believe that God is working even when circumstances do not show immediate evidence of change. It is the decision to trust that God's power is greater than the limitations of the situation. Instead of focusing on what cannot be done, faith shifts the focus to what God is capable of doing. Many people struggle with this because human nature prefers control. People like to understand every step before they take it. They want clear explanations and visible solutions before they feel confident moving forward. But God often works in ways that do not follow human expectations. Sometimes the solution appears at the last possible moment. Sometimes the opportunity comes from a direction that was never considered. Sometimes the answer arrives through people, events, or circumstances that could never have been predicted. These moments reveal something powerful. They remind people that the outcome was not produced by human strength alone. They show that God's power is able to move beyond what human effort could achieve. When a person realizes this, it changes the way they face challenges. Instead of being overwhelmed by the size of the obstacle, they begin to remember the greatness of God. Instead of believing that every problem must be solved by their own strength, they learn to trust that God can step into the situation and make a difference. This kind of trust does not eliminate challenges, but it transforms the way those challenges are experienced. Problems no longer feel like permanent barriers. Difficulties become opportunities to witness God's power at work. The pressure that once created fear can begin to produce faith. The uncertainty that once caused doubt can begin to build confidence in God's ability. A situation that once felt hopeless can become the place where God demonstrates that his power goes far beyond human limitations. Over time, this understanding creates a deeper level of spiritual strength. People begin to see that they do not have to carry every burden alone. They begin to recognize that even when their own strength fails, God's power remains constant. What once looked like the end of the road can become the moment when a new path begins to appear. The place where human ability stops can become the very place where God's power begins to move in extraordinary ways. There are moments in life when circumstances appear so overwhelming that people begin to believe there is no possible solution. The problem may feel too large, the situation too complicated, and the outcome too uncertain. When a person looks at the challenge from a purely human perspective, it may seem like there is no path forward. Every option appears blocked, every plan seems to fail, and every attempt to fix the problem leads to disappointment. These are the moments that often cause people to lose hope. Yet history and faith repeatedly show that the very situations that appear impossible are often the ones where extraordinary breakthroughs occur. When everything seems to collapse, when everything seems to collapse, when every human solution runs out, and when people can no longer depend on their own strength, something remarkable can begin to happen. What once looked like the end of the story can suddenly become the beginning of a miracle. Impossible situations have a unique way of revealing the limits of human power. When life is easy and everything works according to plan, it is easy for people to believe that success is entirely the result of their own effort. Achievements are often attributed to intelligence, hard work, or strategy. While those qualities certainly matter, they can also create the illusion that people are in complete control of their lives. But when a truly difficult situation arrives, that illusion quickly disappears. A person may work harder than ever before and still see no progress. They may search for solutions and find none. They may reach out for help and still remain stuck in the same place. These moments force people to confront the truth that is often uncomfortable. Human strength has limits. However, what appears to be a weakness can actually become the doorway to something greater. When people recognize that their own ability is not enough, they begin to look beyond themselves. They begin to seek help, wisdom, and strength from God in a deeper and more sincere way. Instead of relying solely on their own understanding, they begin to trust that God can intervene in ways they cannot imagine. This is where impossible situations begin to transform into opportunities for miracles. A miracle rarely happens when everything is easy. Miracles occur when the situation is so difficult that the outcome cannot be explained by normal circumstances. They happen when the odds are completely against success, and yet success still appears. They happen when a door that seemed permanently closed suddenly opens in these moments. People realize that something greater than human effort has taken place. Often the delay before the breakthrough is part of the process. Waiting can be painful because it forces people to live in uncertainty. They do not know when the solution will come or how the situation will change. But the waiting period can strengthen faith in powerful ways. It teaches patience, humility, and trust. During the waiting, people may begin to grow in ways they never expected. They may become stronger emotionally, deeper spiritually, and more aware of their dependence on God. The struggle itself becomes a preparation for the blessing that is coming. When the breakthrough finally arrives, it often becomes clear that the impossible situation had a purpose. What once felt like a barrier was actually shaping character and strengthening belief. The struggle created space for God's power to be seen clearly. If the answer had come easily, people might have overlooked the significance of it. They might have believed it was simply good luck or the result of human effort. But when the circumstances were clearly impossible, the outcome becomes unmistakable. The miracle stands as evidence that God was working behind the scenes all along. This realization can change a person's entire outlook on life. Instead of fearing difficult situations, they begin to see them differently. Challenges are no longer viewed only as obstacles, but also as opportunities. Even when the situation looks hopeless, there's a possibility that God is preparing something extraordinary. Faith grows stronger when people remember that God has the ability to turn impossible situations into testimonies of his power. A problem that once brought fear can eventually become a story of victory. A moment that once caused tears can later inspire hope in others. The key is learning not to give up when the situation looks impossible. Many people walk away from their breakthrough because they stop believing before the miracle arrives. They assume that because the problem is too big for them, it must also be too big for God. But the truth is that God specializes in situations that appear impossible to human eyes. What people see as a dead end may actually be the exact place where God plans to demonstrate his power in the most remarkable way. Faith often begins where certainty ends. In everyday life, people are used to moving forward only when they can clearly see the path ahead. They want proof before they believe, clarity before they act, and assurance before they commit. Human nature prefers visible evidence because it creates a sense of control and security. When everything is predictable and understandable, it feels easier to move forward with confidence. However, faith does not operate according to the same rules as human reasoning. Faith asks a person to trust even when the outcome is not visible. It invites someone to believe that something is possible before any clear sign of it appears. This kind of trust can feel uncomfortable because it requires stepping beyond what can be measured or fully explained. In many situations, people wait for the path to appear before they take the first step. They want confirmation that everything will work out before they commit their energy or their hope. But faith works in the opposite direction. Faith moves forward first and trusts that the path will unfold along the way. This does not mean ignoring reality or pretending that difficulties do not exist. Challenges are real and obstacles can be intimidating. But faith changes the way a person responds to those obstacles. Instead of focusing only on what cannot be seen, faith focuses on the character and power of God. When someone truly believes that God is able to guide their life, they beguile. And to understand that the absence of visible answers does not mean that nothing is happening. Often, the most important work is taking place behind the scenes. While a person may not yet see the solution, God may already be arranging circumstances, preparing opportunities, and aligning events that will eventually create a way forward. Waiting for visible proof can sometimes prevent people from experiencing what faith can accomplish. If someone refuses to move until every question is answered, they may remain stuck in the same place for a long time. Faith, on the other hand, allows a person to take steps even when the full picture is not yet clear. This type of trust develops gradually. It often grows through past experiences where God has already proven faithful. When a person looks back at previous challenges, they may begin to notice that solutions appeared at the right moment, even when the situation once seemed uncertain. These memories become reminders that God has been working throughout their life, even during moments when his actions were not immediately visible. As faith grows, a person becomes less dependent on visible circumstances for reassurance. They begin to understand that God's activity is not limited to what human eyes can observe. Just because something cannot be seen does not mean it does not exist. Just because something cannot be seen does not mean it does not exist. This perspective brings a different kind of peace. Instead of feeling anxious about every unanswered question, a person can remain calm while trusting that God is still in control. The uncertainty of the situation does not disappear, but the fear surrounding it becomes less overwhelming. Faith also helps people remain patient during difficult seasons. When the path has not yet appeared, it can be tempting to assume that nothing will change. Doubt begins to whisper that the situation will always remain the same. Faith challenges that assumption by reminding people that God's timing is often different from human expectations. Sometimes the delay exists because preparation is still taking place. Certain lessons may need to be learned, or certain circumstances may need to shift before the path becomes visible. During this time, faith encourages perseverance rather than surrender. Trusting before the path appears also requires courage. It means believing that God's wisdom is greater than human understanding. Even when the future feels uncertain, faith chooses to rely on God's ability to lead the way. Over time, this kind of trust strengthens a person's relationship with God. Instead of depending solely on what they can see or predict, they learn to depend on God's character. They begin to recognize that God's promises are reliable even when circumstances appear confusing. When the path finally does appear, the journey often feels even more meaningful. The person realizes that their faith carried them through the uncertainty and that God was working the entire time. The moment that once seemed filled with doubt becomes a powerful reminder that trusting God before the path appears can lead to experiences far greater than anything that could have been planned through human understanding alone. Many people believe that progress only happens when an existing opportunity appears. They wait for a door to open, for a chance to come their way, or for circumstances to change in a way that creates a clear path forward. Human thinking often assumes that success depends on finding the right opportunity that already exists somewhere ahead. People search for open doors, available resources, or favorable situations that can help them move forward. But there are moments in life when no door seems open at all. A person may look in every direction and still find nothing that seems promising. Every option appears closed, and every option appears closed, and every attempt to move forward feels blocked. It is in these moments that many people begin to feel trapped. They assume that if the opportunity is not already visible, then it must not exist. This is where the power of God's word becomes truly remarkable. God does not depend on existing opportunities in order to move someone forward. While people are limited by the options they can see, God has the ability to create possibilities that did not previously exist. He is not restricted by the doors that are closed because he can build entirely new doors when necessary. Human plans often rely on what is already available. A person may look at their education, their experience, their connections, and their financial resources in order to determine what they can achieve. While these things certainly influence life's direction, they do not limit what God can do. When God becomes involved, the boundaries that once defined what seemed possible can suddenly expand. Sometimes a new path begins with an unexpected meeting. Two people who would never normally cross paths suddenly connect, and that relationship's to an opportunity that changes everything. Other times, the situation shifts in ways that no one predicted. Circumstances align at the right moment, opening possibilities that had never been considered before. These moments remind people that God's creativity goes far beyond human imagination. When people believe there are only a few available paths, God may already be preparing a completely different route. While individuals may feel stuck because they cannot see a solution, God may be working in areas they cannot observe, arranging events that will eventually lead to something new. It is important to understand that God's ability to create new paths often requires patience. When someone feels trapped, the natural response is to search urgently for an immediate solution. The people waiting period can feel frustrating because nothing appears to be changing. Yet during this time, God may be constructing a path that takes time to develop. Just as a building requires a strong foundation before it can stand, some opportunities require preparation before they become visible. God may be shaping circumstances, preparing people, or developing qualities within a person that will be necessary for the next step in their journey. Although the process may feel slow, every part of it can contribute to a future breakthrough. Trusting that God can create new paths also changes the way people think about limitations. Instead of believing that their current situation defines their future, they begin to recognize that God's power is greater than any restriction they face. Financial limitations, lack of connections, or difficult circumstances do not have the final word when God is involved. Throughout life, many individuals have experienced moments when an unexpected opportunity appeared at exactly the right time. Something they never planned suddenly became the key to their progress. Looking back, they often realized that the path they eventually followed did not exist when they first started their journey. It was formed step by step as events unfolded. This realization strengthens faith and encourages people to keep trusting even when the road ahead is unclear. When someone understands that God can create opportunities that do not yet exist, they are less likely to become discouraged by closed doors. A closed door no longer feels like the end of the story. Instead, it becomes a reminder that God may be preparing something different and possibly something better. Believing in God's ability to create new paths also inspires courage. People become more willing to move forward even when the future feels uncertain. They learn to rely less on what they can currently tell, and more on the confidence that God is able to shape the future in ways they cannot predict. Over time, this perspective transforms the way challenges are viewed. Obstacles no longer appear as permanent barriers. Instead, they become part of a larger process in which God may be building a new direction. What once seemed impossible can slowly turn into a journey filled with unexpected opportunities, reminding people that God is not limited to opening existing paths. He has the power to create entirely new ones. One of the greatest challenges people face during difficult times is the temptation to give up too soon. When a problem continues longer than expected, discouragement begins to grow. At first, people may face the challenge with determination and hope. They believe that if they keep trying, the situation will eventually change. But when days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, the weight of the struggle can begin to drain their confidence. It is during these long and exhausting seasons that perseverance becomes one of the most important qualities a person can develop.
Many breakthroughs happen only after a period of persistence. The moment when everything feels the hardest is often the very moment when the breakthrough is closest.
The difficulty is that people cannot always see how close they are to the answer they have been waiting for. When progress is invisible, it is easy to assume that nothing is happening. Doubt begins to whisper that the effort is pointless and that continuing to hope will only lead to more disappointment. This voice of discouragement has caused many people to walk away from situations that were on the edge of transformation. Imagine someone digging for water in a dry area. They dig for a long time, but the ground remains dry. Eventually, frustration convinces them that there is no water beneath the surface. They stop digging and move on, believing the effort was wasted. Yet it is possible that only a few more inches of digging would have reached the water they were searching for. Life often works in a similar way. Breakthroughs are sometimes hidden just beyond the point where people decide to stop trying. The struggle before the breakthrough can feel overwhelming because the reward has not yet appeared. But perseverance keeps a person moving forward long enough for the change to finally take place. Faith plays a powerful role in sustaining perseverance. When people believe that God is still working even during the waiting period, they gain the strength to continue. Instead of interpreting the delay as failure, they begin to see it as part of a larger process that is still unfolding. Trusting God during these moments requires patience. Patience does not mean doing nothing. It means continuing to believe while time passes without immediate results. It means maintaining hope even when circumstances appear unchanged. Many people admire stories of success and victory, but they often overlook the persistence that came before the breakthrough. Behind every powerful testimony, there are usually seasons of uncertainty, frustration, and waiting. Those who eventually experience victory are often the ones who refuse to give up during the most difficult part of the journey. Perseverance also strengthens character. As a person continues through hardship, they develop resilience and inner strength. They learn to rely on faith rather than feelings. They discover that determination can carry them through moments when motivation disappears. Over time, the struggle itself begins to produce growth. The person who once doubted their ability to endure becomes stronger through the process of continuing forward. Each step taken during the difficult season becomes evidence that they are capable of more than they once believed. When the breakthrough finally arrives, it often brings a deep sense of gratitude and understanding. The person realizes that the journey was shaping them while they were waiting for the result. The perseverance they practiced prepared them to appreciate the outcome in a much deeper way. Looking back, they may recognize that the moment they almost gave up was the moment when the change was closest. If they had stopped moving forward, they might never have experienced the victory that eventually came. This realization becomes a powerful lesson for the future. When new challenges appear, they remember that perseverance carried them through before. Instead of giving up quickly, they become more willing to remain patient and faithful through the process. Breakthroughs rarely happen instantly. They often develop quietly beneath the surface while a person continues to believe and move forward. By refusing to quit, individuals place themselves in a position to experience the results of what God has been working on all along. One of the most powerful truths a person can understand is that God is not limited by circumstances. Human beings often look at their situation and judge the outcome based on what they can see. If the resources are small, they expect small results. If the obstacles are large, they assume success will be difficult or even impossible. People naturally measure possibilities by visible conditions, but God does not measure situations the way humans do. What appears overwhelming to people does not intimidate him. The challenges that make individuals anxious or fearful are not barriers to his ability to act. While people may focus on the size of the problem, God's attention is on the power he possesses to transform that problem. When someone faces a difficult situation, their mind often begins listing every reason why the problem cannot be solved. They may think about financial limitations, lack of connections, or past failures. Each negative factor becomes another piece of evidence suggesting that the situation is beyond repair. The more they analyze the challenge, the more impossible it may appear. This way of thinking can slowly weaken a person's confidence. When the focus remains on the problem, fear tends to grow. Doubt begins to replace hope, and the weight of the situation feels heavier each day. Eventually, the problem can start to feel larger than the person's faith. Yet one shift in perspective can change everything. Instead of concentrating on the size of the problem, a person can begin focusing on the greatness of God. The problem may still exist, but the understanding of who God is places that problem into a completely different context. When people remember that God's power has no limit, the situation no longer seems as overwhelming. The same circumstances remain, but they are now being viewed through the lens of faith rather than fear. Instead of asking how the problem will be solved through human ability, a person begins trusting that God can move in ways beyond human understanding. God's solutions are often different from human expectations. People tend to imagine solutions that follow logical patterns. They expect answers to come through familiar methods or predictable opportunities. However, God often works in ways that surprise people. Sometimes the answer arrives through a person who was never expected to help. Sometimes circumstances shift suddenly, creating opportunities that did not exist before. At other times, an internal change occurs within a person, giving them wisdom, courage, or creativity that leads them to a solution they had never considered. These unexpected outcomes remind people that God's wisdom is greater than human reasoning. That while individuals
I see only a few possible options, God can see countless possibilities. His understanding of the future allows him to arrange events in ways that people cannot foresee.
Another important truth is that God's timing often plays a key role in how solutions appear. People usually want immediate answers because waiting can feel uncomfortable. The longer a problem continues, the more pressure and frustration it can create. Yet the delay does not mean that God has forgotten or ignored the situation. Sometimes the waiting period allows certain pieces to fall into place. People who will play a role in the solution may still be on their way. Circumstances may still be developing. Lessons may still be forming within the person who is going through the struggle. When the right moment arrives, everything can come together in a way that would not have been possible earlier. Trusting God during this time requires patience and confidence. It means believing that even when nothing appears to be changing, God is still working behind the scenes. Just because his work is invisible does not mean it has stopped. Over time, many people discover that the situations they once feared the most eventually became the places where they experienced God's power most clearly. What once looked like an impossible problem turned into a powerful reminder that God is able to do far more than human effort alone could ever achieve. This understanding strengthens faith for future challenges. When new difficulties arise, people can remember that God has already proven his ability to move beyond circumstances. Instead of being overwhelmed by what they see, they can place their confidence in the one whose power is greater than every obstacle they face. One of the most transformative moments in a person's life often comes when they begin to recognize that their struggles are not meaningless. During difficult, old seasons, it is easy to feel as though the pain, confusion, and waiting serve no purpose. When someone is in the middle of a challenge, they often focus only on the discomfort of the moment. They may ask why the situation is happening and wonder whether the struggle will ever lead to something good. However, many people later discover that the very experiences they once wished to escape were actually shaping them in powerful ways. Challenges have a unique ability to develop qualities that comfort and success alone cannot produce. Patience, resilience, humility, and deeper faith often grow in the soil of difficulty. When life moves smoothly, people may not think much about their dependence on God. Everything appears to function according to their plans. And the sense of control can create the impression that they are guiding their own path without much need for divine help. But when obstacles arise and human solutions fail, individuals are often drawn into a deeper relationship with God.
I'll be all right. You don't have to stay. If you've already chosen, I won't stand in your way. I can feel it in your distance, in the way you barely speak, like your heart is somewhere else now, somewhere I can't reach. I was trying just to hold us while you slowly slipped away. Now I'm left with all the silence you didn't want to say. Maybe I just held on to something already gone. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. We don't need to fake the feeling, I can see it in your eyes. There's no reason left for staying when the love already died. Through the quiet in your voice, I can hear your choice. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive okay. I'll be all right.